thank you very much that we were given the opportunity to speak on this occasion. It's interesting that 5 years after we face another epidemic, we are facing a pandemic. There are a lot of need for us to provide adequate information on some of the things that are governing this current pandemic compared to Ebola. They are different in a lot of ways, and I hope that I will be given the opportunity to explain in some of how this outbreak, this pandemic, is extremely difficult from the viral point of view, from the mode of transmission, the mortality, and the global financing of outbreak. It's a lot different from Ebola, and I hope that we can use this opportunity to see, but also it gives us aspiration that in the midst of this outbreak, we're seeing accelerated effort to get vaccine. So it's an opportunity for us to be present and to share exactly our work with the outbreak and then the global perspective.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fallah, and we are very glad to have you here on our panel today. Our next panelist will now have the Auditor General of the Republic of Liberia, the Honorable Yusador Gaye, to have
I hope you can hear me. Good morning, all.
Yes.
And Gerald, for some reason, we cannot hear you. You are not audible. So after my introduction, I will off my video. I am panelist, the international community, all protocols observed. Thank you on this webinar today. The team from tackling what comes the time when accountability and transparency in the utilization. Transparency and accountability is the bedrock of democratic governance, and the lack of it has the propensity of breeding public distrust in the fight and elimination of the virus in Liberia. When you lose the trust of the public on measures being implemented to fight the virus as a result of the lack of accountability and transparency, there is no guarantee that the populace will do or believe the messaging from the health authorities. To instill public confidence in the measure being implemented to fight the virus, expenditure of public resources, contract and agreements entered into by the government must be guided entirely by the public financial laws and the Public Protection, Procurement and Concession Act, as well as other relevant law. With that, I'm looking forward to a very interactive discussion, and I thank you. I will turn on my video because of the internet connection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam AG, for the opening remarks. And we believe that with accountability and transparency of public resources, we can do well in this country to move forward. Just a quick check. We are seeing some sections in the comments that people are having some difficulties getting me. I just want to give a check. Are you getting me now?
Yeah, it's better, much better.
It's far better now.
It's much better. Thank you. It's much better.
Thank you very much. We will now go to the Council of Law and Public Health expert, Mr. Tolbert. Nyeswa, could you now give us your opening remarks?
Garrett, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to honor your invitation at this time and to be a part of this webinar. Center has been a transparency watchdog in our society, advocating against and fighting corruption. And thank you and to your Executive Director, Aidoo, for inviting me to be here this morning. I make it a pleasure to honor invitations from Liberia on programs that are going on, especially when it comes to infectious diseases that are affecting the world today, and especially when you also talk about accountability and transparency to tell our role. Let me also extend greetings to my fellow panelists, the Auditor General of Liberia, Madam Gaye, Dr. Mosoka Fallah, the head of the National Public Health Institute, for being fellow panelists and to the participants. And look forward to hearing from us panelists what we get to offer to the community and people of Liberia. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nyeswa, and we look forward to your contributions this morning. Our next panelist is not a strange face to us. Mr. Gerald Aidoo, will you go ahead and provide your opening remarks? Harry, I'm muted.
Okay, I guess it's okay. All right, so Gerald, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Let me say it's a pleasure to be part of the panel. As all of you may know, this coronavirus or COVID-19 comes at a point in time in our country where we cannot afford disinformation and misinformation that clouds public judgment about how to stay safe. You know, empirical data coming from all the countries that are doing better in the fight against coronavirus disease have shown that governments with high accountability, transparency, and trust levels have proved to have more success in responding credibly, you know, and responsibly, and even more effectively to this whole fight against coronavirus. It is therefore imperative that as a nation, to address coronavirus, we need to improve governance and accountability, as well as transparency measures if we are to be able to be successful in the fight against COVID. So it's really a pleasure to join at the panel, and I look forward to quite an engaging interaction on this subject matter. Thank you, Gerald, for having me.
Thank you very much, Harold. So to our viewers, we had some initial technical difficulties. And I know there are people who are coming in on our Facebook page but will not connect, but now we are currently live and direct on Facebook. So, I mean, for those of you who are watching via Facebook, you may have missed a part of the webinar, but rest assured that you are still about to get the best of the discussion. So at this time, we'll now move directly in to what we are here for today. And we'll begin our discussion by speaking with the Honorable Director-General of the National Public Health Institute, Dr. Mosoka Fallah. Dr. Fallah, where are we with fight against COVID-19? Are we making any successes? Are we stalled or are we failing? Dr. Fallah, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Just myself, like you said, it is a great answer. We have a little over 1,200 cases now. The absolute number of cases we are getting within 24 hours are lower compared to the rest of the countries or Africa. And so, I mean, once you go above 1,000, then it's cause for worry. And we know that the current trend globally is that we see the rebounds of cases all around the world. And, you know, so our numbers have crossed the 1,000 mark, slightly above 1,200. Our absolute number of cases we've seen 24 hours are a little bit low. And so with this COVID fight, I would say we're not extremely high, but we're not low. So we're right there in the middle in terms of the numbers we are getting. Yeah, so this is where we stand right now in terms of the COVID.
Are you convinced that we are on the right track, that we are not letting our guards down so soon, that we are on track to defeating COVID?
That's a very good question you bring out. And I will be honest with you, I worry a lot every time I leave my house and come to work or I drive around the town. For two reasons. And this is not only unique to Liberia, but it worries me. I was in Nima recently. We do know that there are efforts on the way to develop vaccine, which is going to be the way to end this outbreak or manage it considerably. But in the absence of a vaccine, what has been demonstrated is the mandatory use of face masks. It is sad to note that in Liberia, as they were seeing most of our in Nima, probably around 1 to 3% of the population are using face masks. Yeah, so it's a serious problem. The use of face masks, which has been shown as the one sure way to help us succeed in managing and containing this outbreak in the absence of vaccine, is very limited in Liberia. That's something that we need to do. And even those who wear the face mask, some of them are not wearing it properly. We got to remind them all the time to put the mask. You cannot be talking and take the mask off. You cannot free your nose. So for me, that one worries me a lot, that to some extent, June 19, when Enfield launched the Mask for All, the No Mask, No Entry campaign, we saw that the momentum picked up, but again, it's going down. So that for me is a cause for worry as an institute. As we go ahead, I will take some of the strategy we're having in place in terms of regulation, enforcement that needs to happen. But for me, it's worrisome for me that the only one way we have the use of masks is very low in the country. Oh, yeah.
Wow, thank you. Now to other issues, Dr. Fallah. When we were at the heat of the Ebola crisis, Madam Sirleaf on October 19, 2014, wrote what she termed as a letter to the world, pleading for international assistance, international support, so that people can come in and help us with our own fight against Ebola. And I think as a result of that, we saw international help coming in. For example, the United States, they send resources, they send troops to this country, U.S. Marines to help in our efforts. Even the Chinese, they built some ETUs and they also provided some manpower. But with this COVID-19, we've not really seen the government making that clarion call to international partners. What is happening? Do we feel that we can battle this virus alone? Or what strategy are we using that we're not tapping on the pool of resources we have outside of Liberia?
I mean, like I said, this is the best forum I've ever gotten to make clarity. A lot of times people don't understand how much effort has been made to achieve that goal. But let me just give you two examples to tell you that COVID-19 cannot be Ebola. I will give you one example. A few months ago, I was negotiating with MSF for the 14 military to build us an attachment. MSF, France, Belgium, I was discussing. They asked us to pay $36,000. MSF asked us to pay them to do the work. And I'm like, wow. I mean, you brought millions of dollars doing Ebola. And the lady looked me in the face and said, you know what? We in Europe, we're having hundreds of thousands of cases. There is no dollar to spare. What we can do for Liberia is that if you give her $36,000, we'll be able to build that for you. So you see the difference. During the Ebola, Liberia got $2.6 billion in support. And the reason was the Ebola only in 3 countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. The second instance, there was a meeting held in Geneva to look at the issue of logistics and supply for COVID-19. Liberia has some old expired PPE that we've been keeping our logistic basis. In that meeting, the World Health Organization told countries that as long as the seal is not broken, you can use expired PPE because there was a global shortage of PPE. During the start of the COVID in China, a colleague of mine from Wuhan was asking Liberia to help them with PPE. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to lay here is that the demand for funding is global, is around all the countries. So there's so much fiscal space available to bring money to us. I want to tell you that for free. Having said that, have the government made appeal to the countries of the world? Yes, I will tell you that. Based on the Ebola experience, we launched what we call the Special Presidential Advisory Committee on COVID, headed by the President. At the launching ceremony in March, in late February, His Excellency invited all the embassies and all the European Union were all invited at the Executive Mansion. I did the presentation of what we needed because in February, we developed a strategic plan on preparedness, response, and recovery for $43 million. We did that presentation to the US ambassador, all of the ambassadors. Then the president re-echoed that to ask the nations and the countries around the world to assist Liberia to prepare and respond to COVID. The only people that have come forward to help us has been the World Bank, and even the World Bank. The World Bank has been able to help us with the reducing money. That was a loan Liberia platform to use for regular surveillance system. Now it is that money that we are using for this response. So basically, yes, that was followed by a second meeting that we held with the ambassadors, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs, to make appeals to the international community. The president set the stage and made the appeal. But the issue I will have to say here, unlike Ebola, so step one, we formed the Presidential Advisory Committee headed by His Excellency George Manuia. We called all the missions together at the mansion and we presented the budget. We have yet to receive 50% because the fact of the matter is that COVID pandemic, as the word implies, is draining the resources of all countries in the world. Even the great US, our traditional partners, are themselves struggling with lockdown. Yes, the appeal has made, the funding has critical because unlike Ebola, this is a global pandemic. You know that the airline have lost billions of dollars by just shutting down international flights. The oil price have dropped in the market. People are not going to work. So basically there's so much little money to go around, but everyone needs that money to protect themselves. So yes, we have made an appeal. Similarly, President Ellen Johnson, our president made an appeal, called a meeting. I was there, I did a presentation. We've gotten fewer responses because they themselves have to deal with this. I hope I address this issue today.
Yeah, so Dr. Fallah, so you're saying basically that it's just a matter of strategy in terms of the difference between the approach of the WIAC government and the approach of the Cllr government. But Cllr,
no, it is not strategy. No, it is reality. It is the same approach. President Weah has gone to make appeal to all of the missions, meeting with the ambassador. I'm saying that the difference is the reality. The reality of Madam Cllr is that Ebola was only in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, and so there were money to spare around. The reality is that America is spending billions, if not trillions of dollars to pay their people to stay home. The same thing in the UK, the same thing in Europe and China. And because they have to deal with their own survival as nations, they cannot spare much money to give to us. I've said that the strategy has yielded result. We got funding and commitment from the World Bank. So the point is, the reality of this disease is that the countries themselves are struggling to survive. But we made the appeal.
Great, Dr. Fallah, thanks very much. Now we now go to Councillor Tolbert Nyeswa. Councillor Nyeswa, if we look at how aid has been going around in the world, we see the West usually coming to the aid of people of what we consider as third world countries, underdeveloped countries. But now we have seen is that the West, instead of being donors, are now soliciting aid. For example, you see countries like Cuba are now exporting doctors around the world to places like Italy to be able to help in the fight of COVID-19. That's sort of a kind of strange phenomenon. How will you describe how countries around the world collaborate and pool resources together and share information together to be able to defeat COVID-19? How is that collaboration working from your experience from where you sit at the John Hopkins University?
Garrett, thank you again very much. A very great question that you asked. I'm happy that you asked that question. We live in an interconnected world. It means that no one country is safe in a global pandemic than the other country. So we in an interconnected world where countries assist each other. The Ebola epidemic was in West Africa as you know, started in 2014, was a at the time existential threat to over 24 million people in the region. The reason I say 24 million, when you combine the population of Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, you have that number. Those three countries were most affected, and we developed a plan, one strategy, one program to be present in West Africa. If you want to get resources, you have to be credible. You have to put your priorities down. Very, very simply, put a priority down. One of the issues that somebody may argue that the government of Liberia was fighting a pandemic and at the same time finding resources, about $25 million so people to provide food aid to the population, when that resources could have gone to the health crisis. The first step, the first thing you want to do, if I was sitting in a seat like Dr. Fallah, like Dr. William Jala, I will advocate with authority. The reason is the international community, if you don't have it, they know that. But if your priorities are not falling in line, then you create difficulty of the kind of support that you want to get to do what you want to do. And so I would have taken a good chunk of that resources, put it into health, and bring the disease under control, because if the disease is under control, then the social economic situation are created in the population. The argument would be the people are poor, they were locked down, so they needed food, and we're putting the resources to the food. That would be a very good argument. You want to feed people. The reason the people were locked down, the number one priority is a disease that is in the population. So you want to get that disease to zero. A commitment with transmission in the population. So the world is interconnected. Cuba supporting other countries in Europe, Russia sending supplies to the United States, other countries sending supplies to Liberia and other countries in developing world, low middle income countries. Those things happen in the pandemic. So priority setting, action setting, and what you want to do is very, very much critical in outbreak response. The Auditor General, in her opening comments, was very clear with the issue of during a pandemic and epidemic, accountability and trust in government is very, very much important. In as much as you're fighting your disease, the international world want to see that you're transparent, you're credible, and you're putting your resources to where it's supposed to go. So for instance, you can say I'm buying tons and tons of rice for people, then you're asking for PPEs. Those partners are right on the ground. They are living with you, they are sitting with you, they see why you're spending your resources on, but yet you're asking them what you want to do with money to fight a disease. So we have to very much calculate our priority as a country and go to the areas that they are needed. I hope I was able to provide information regarding that.
Yes, thanks. And just as a follow-up, are you suggesting that when the country is locked down for an indefinite period, the government is in error for thinking about providing food for its citizens? So we agree that we are in a pandemic, but what goes side by side? You may just be focusing on the pandemic and the people might be starving, and they will be basically finished by the time the pandemic is under control. So you need to have these people sustained. You need to have them fed. Are you suggesting that strategy was in error?
Now, I wouldn't use your words. Saying other strategy, I would say is I would use in terms of priorities. The poverty paper that was crafted, and there were priorities of things the government wanted to deliver. We want to build roads, healthcare, education, and other basic social services when COVID-19 struck. So COVID-19 brought us to what is completely stagnant right now. Nothing is happening. And so I think if you go to the World Bank or you go to the IMF and your international partners and multilateral organizations and want resources, you will want to make sure that those things forward. I just listened to my successor, Dr. Mosoka Fallah, talking about going to borrow or trying to build extension of the military hospital. And he said MSF was charging the government 36,000. Why should you go for money for food, bank and other sources? Create so if our priority one, we find resources to get rid of the outbreak. That's the point I'm making.
Thank you very much. Am I there? Yes. So we are still on this issue of aid, Honorable Auditor General. As attested to by the Honorable Nyeswa, that transparency and accountability is important in terms of dealing with emergency funding. Now, the government of Liberia started wise to introduce some stimulus package around the tune of 25 million United States dollars. And that amount was, instead of the government itself handling the money, maybe in the spirit of transparency, maybe in the spirit of accountability so that they cannot be accused. They say, well, it is important that we find a third party that will lead this effort. So the World Food Program was engaged to provide these services in terms of providing food for the Liberian people. Now, Madam Auditor General, is the World Food Program accountable to the Liberian people? Can the Liberian people hold the World Food Program accountable for that $25 million in terms of how to spend it? Can the GSC move in to audit the funds that were received by the World Food Program?
Thank you, Chair. This is a good platform to understand this. Liberia is a member of the UN bodies, and there are certain rules for international organizations. So before we get into it as a nation, we should understand it. To answer your question, I would say no, 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 because with the UN bodies, once they have their own board of external auditors and Supreme Audit Institute compete, and they are appointed for so many years on those boards, and they audit certain certain UN how you call them, sub programs like World Food Program, UN WIMI. You have certain countries that their Supreme Audit Institution are designated to audit these programs. So no, we cannot audit it, but something we could have done with planning is that, and then the reason is because this program is not part of their annual projected activities. So if you go to them, it will cost you, because then they have to put in resources, so it will cost you. So for us to have been able to audit it, it should have been in the contract that you want your Supreme Audit Institution to audit it. And I'm not sure, because we have not been privy to that contract, But no, once you have the UN bodies involved, they have their own processes for audit.
So Madam Gaye, in other words, you are saying that the Liberian people will be left in limbo as it relates to how the funds are used?
No, those accounts will be audited, but it will not be the GSC that will audit it. We have to look for the body that audited, and then we will be able to see that. And then they can share that with the Liberian people. It will definitely be audited, but not by the side, but by the UN external auditors.
And whose responsibility is it to trigger that audit? I mean, the Liberian people are concerned. Since this whole food issue started, people have been around demanding there have been issues about administrative costs. We've been having exchanges, the WFP coming back, people making claims, counter claims, government making clarifications. So whose responsibility is it to be able to trigger this audit, because the people need information?
The United Nations. Sorry to cut in, but it's the United Nations, because you are part as a country, are part of that, and you agree to certain modalities in as a member of the organization. So the UN will audit that program and will trigger that.
Great, wow, that's interesting. Now we take our own Harold Aidoo. Harold, you and I, we work in civil society, and a lot of the work we do is based on donor funding. We have donors coming in country and they give money to civil society organizations. They give money for philanthropic purposes. They give money to government to strengthen their international relations and all of that, development assistance. But this time around, we are seeing something different. What I would describe as aid in reverse. Instead of international organizations coming to our aid, we are now providing aid to international organizations so they can give us aid. How would you describe this approach in terms of governance and democracy?
Well, thank you, Gerald. I think it's an interesting question. I can simply say that it is a tragic mistake and a misguided political decision. You know, it is a decision made on the basis of political administration, the current political administration's lack of trust and confidence in established institutions to deliver effectively, and certainly not the most effective way to spend the taxpayers' dollars. Because I'll tell you what, Gerald, in the 2019-2020 recast budget, that means that the total COVID-19 response recast budget was 32.7 million United States dollars. Now, out of the 32.7 million United States dollars, 25 million was allocated to the National Food Assistance Agency. Well, it seems to be that we kind of set up some kind of structure overnight, because, I mean, maybe I stand to be corrected, but this is not an entity that, I mean, is publicly known, I'm sure by you yourself. Now, in this 25 million that was apportioned for food, you know, I mean, strangely, I wonder the decision, that's why I even term it as a tragic mistake. 6% was meant for administrative costs. Now, ironically, even if we are saying that 6% of that amount is supposed to be 6% of the 25 million, but surprisingly, they apportioned the 6% not on the 25 million that is going for the food aid or the food assistance, but rather they apportioned the 6% on the 32.7 million. So why would you apportion an administrative cost for money that is not even going to be used by the World Food Program? Because 6% of 25 million is around 1.5 million. But you and I know we're talking about 1.8 million that was given for administrative costs. So why would the government want to pay for administrative costs or for work that is not being done by the WFP? Right? Now, secondly, well, you also look at in terms of what we are seeded or what we signed up to do with the World Food Program. Are we then saying that we don't have competent institutions to be able to manage this food? And on top of it, even though we signed a contract with the World Food Program, but in terms of the actual work that is being done, World Food Program is contracting Liberian entities and underpaying. There are three main institutions that are involved in this whole process. You have the LISGIS, which is the statistical body. Then you have a group called Christian Humanitarian Services, and then another group called Vosida West Africa. These are local groups. Now, Vosida, CHS, which is the Christian Humanitarian Services, are responsible for what we call data verification, ticketing, and distribution. So you got LISGIS, who is doing the mapping of all the houses, enumeration of all the houses that are supposed to benefit. You got the CHS, who is doing verification after LISGIS has completed her work, and then giving tickets for the food. And then you have the Vosida, who is actually doing the food distribution. Now the question is, why are we paying $1.8 million just for Liberian businesses and Liberian entities to be given handouts to be able to do the same work that the government claims it has no capacity to do, or vis-a-vis it believes that we need to be able to create some form of transparency and accountability in the management of the food distribution. So therefore, giving the Cllr the capacity that we all know that World Food Program comes with, we are giving World Food Program $1.8 million, only for them to subcontract local Liberian groups and give them handouts to do similar work that they've been paid $1.8 million Liberian of our taxpayers' money. We think that is unfair to us as people and as a nation. Now, there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of lack of accountability and transparency that beclouds the entire food distribution. Now, for the past 2 months, all efforts to obtain even the plan to know who's going to receive what across the country, it has been difficult. The World Food Program has blatantly refused to provide that kind of data. Now, the distribution is taking place in a haphazard and piecemeal approach. Now, beyond even the lack of information, we emphasize at the onset that, look, accountability and transparency and trust are important elements in defeating COVID, because already there is a seeming lack of trust within the population that the government wants to eat money. So therefore, people don't even trust the messaging that is coming from government. Now we even move on to resources that have been received by the government. Dr. Fallah did mention.
How are you there? Aaron? Well, it seems there are connectivity issues. Aaron, are you there? I'm getting you. Sorry, I'm here now.
Hello, Gerald?
Yes,
can you say something if you can hear? Okay, so Gerald, basically, there has been a huge information gap as far as this whole COVID response is concerned. And then I was to say that, I felt that it's completely disingenuous and part of Hello?
Yes, sorry, Harold, I was off. Sorry, but we'll come back to you, Harold. I'm going to get back to you on that. But now I'll move again to Dr. Fallah. Dr. Fallah, when we had this outbreak coming in the country, the government of Liberia moved in to announce a series of measures. So there was now national health emergency declared, and Mosoka County was basically, and Margibi were basically cut off from the rest of the country. We had schools closed, we had churches effectively closed. People could not go to banks in huge numbers. So there were a lot of measures that were put in place in terms of how the government responds to these virus. How did the government derive that these measures were appropriate? We had Ebola, which was as deadly as anything, but we did not reach the extent to which civil liberties and the movements of people, all of these things were restricted. Now we have COVID-19, we have all of these measures. How did we reach the decision that that was the best approach?
All right, thank you for raising these points. Again, go back to my first premise. Ebola and COVID-19 are two different. To understand any disease, there are two cardinal points you want to watch for. One, how fast does it spread the transmission and how many persons it kills? How fast it spread and how many persons it kills? Let me put it in context for you. From 1976 to 2020, there have been 17,000 cases of Ebola. 17,000 cases of Ebola. Of that 17,000 cases, that is about 44 years, 17,000 cases. Of that 17,000 cases, of those 17,000 cases, 50% of them died. But in the last few months alone, there have been 1 million cases in Africa alone. We have over 20 million cases of COVID. What this simply means, this is a disease that spread very, very fast. And so if you have a disease, and why is it that this disease spread fast? Anytime a disease is respiratory in nature, where I got to cough and sneeze and give it to you, then that disease increases, right? Second thing, this disease has what we call pre-asymptomatic and asymptomatic. Ebola, until Ebola work, we see the redness of our volume, but someone can spread this disease without showing any sign and symptom. Essentially, this is a disease that spread very fast than anything, and than any other disease the world have seen. Essentially, the only way we could control the disease around the world was to try to restrain human interaction. Restraining human interaction was shown as the best way from China to other countries that have done successful job, right? Number two, it was a new disease that we're learning. And so we learn as we go ahead. Basically, this disease cannot be compared to Ebola in no way. In 24-hour time, the number of cases we get is equal to all the cases we have in West Africa. So because of the intensity of the spread, the ability to affect certain people to die, you know, almost going to 1 million deaths now. Basically, that was the only solution to shut down system. If you do a good job, there's a far range. There were countries that went 100%, but we could not do it, given our economic. I went to West Point during COVID, and I just knew that lockdown would be a challenge, or social distancing would be a challenge. But this disease, given the intensity of spread, the rate at which it was spreading, there was nothing else we could have done to compare to Ebola, where the whole time we only have 4,300 cases. Right. That's the number of cases that happen in South Africa in one day.
You're saying that you went to West Point and you realized that there was a challenge in ensuring that there would have been a challenge in ensuring that the people in
social distancing
prescribed health protocols. So why didn't they proceed with the advice?
No, hold on, no, this is not what my point is. No, there is a compromised health protocol, like the use of nose masks. There is a compromised protocol that was done in Ghana, where in the market they chose certain day, they gave color. If your color is red, you will come to sell on Tuesday. If your color is green, you will sell on Wednesday. And so the measure is that in the midst of these challenges, you want to reduce human interaction. Going back to the boom of your question, the core issue, because of the alarming rate at which the disease was spreading, and the only way we could have done it was because it is respiratory in nature, it's spread by droplet. we had to find a way to reduce human gathering. Countries that open back from lockdown, there are studies that have shown that those countries that open quickly have gone into major issues. Right now, the citizens in Israel are asking for Benjamin Netanyahu to resign because he opened school and the cases went high up. So this was a tough decision that our leaders had to make. We had to choose three things in COVID: economics, health, and politics. From the very beginning, what we wanted to do as people and as nation was to survive. In order to survive, we had to look at the social economic. The country suffered, but that was the only way to control. One, new people coming in the country, we had to shut down our airport. That's one. Amplification within the communities, we had to restrict people movement because, again, it comes to how does it disease behave. Respiratory in nature, asymptomatic carrier, and pre-symptomatic carrier. And even as you open up, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Fallah. And we now go to Mr. Nyeswa. Mr. Nyeswa, you were here, you managed the incident management team to Ebola. You listened to Dr. Fallah, it was clear that there is a stark difference between Ebola and COVID. I mean, people knew about Ebola, and so there were studies and experiences that would be drawn on to address the Ebola crisis. Now we have a COVID-19 that is a novel coronavirus. Nobody knows about COVID-19, and so there have to be measures put into place since it was an unknown virus. Do you think those measures, in terms of our context as a country, do you think those measures were the appropriate measures to enact or to put in place to ensure that we confront an infectious disease such as COVID?
Garrett, thank you. Let's put it in context. And let me state my position that I stated. I had an interview on Cllr, and I think it was sometime maybe in May or June. I had an interview in Cllr and put it up here. The measures to take from the early beginning based on my experience, my and my experience global. And I also spoke to the Voice of America, Shaka So, the Africa guy on VOA and the BBC. And we had a panel discussion with colleagues on the BBC. And all of the experts from Africa who were the vast countries in Africa who were very clear that lockdown, state of emergencies, curfew would not work in African countries, developing countries for that matter. African countries. And we were clear and gave the reason why those measures will not work in those countries. And I think, and we give advice of what are the measures that will work in those countries. If you are dealing with an outbreak, you have to deal with it, especially a pandemic. You have to deal with it with context, country context. It's very, very much important. What worked in Europe might not be the same that will work in China. What worked in the United States might not be the same that will work in Nigeria and geographic and social dynamics of the country, the layout and how people live, very, very much important. You cannot tell me that you will lock down Monrovia for months, lock down West Point, lock down Nickeltown, lock down Stony Wine, and tell the people there to stay home like we do here in the United States when US somebody in the United States 24/7. I have internet in my home 24/7. The grocery stores are open. They allow people in to go and grab food, water, anything and stock out. If they didn't even have food in the home, you can pick up the telephone and call the state and they will supply you with food and water. Can we do that? It's very, very much. And so when I saw countries were declaring state of emergency, curfew, and putting people under emergency power, I came up strictly and said it wouldn't work. And some countries in Africa saw the signs and the strategy and reversed course immediately and lifted some of the curfew and the measures the draconian measures that were being put in place in Africa. It's easy to say, today there is state of emergency. It's easy for the legislature to ratify it. And tomorrow is still an emergency or is lockdown. But the disease that is spreading in the population, it does not. And we saw it. Now, my question would be, when the cases were 100 cases, we posted an emergency, we put curfew, we put, these cases are about 1,000 right now, yet we open airports, we open schools, we still go to political rallies. So what is the measure? These are things that work. Social distancing will work, and social distancing is not lockdown. Social distancing is telling people the number of people that can gather, people going to church, preventing them because they're large crowd, political rallies, they're large crowd, people, crowding up. Those are social distancing measures that can work in places like Africa and other developed countries that don't have the kind of architecture, infrastructure that the people in the West. So for you to compare people in the United States, in Europe, and compare it with African countries, it's like comparing oranges and apples. Now, the epidemiology of the disease is correct, meaning that the transmission mode of the disease and how you compare the disease is different from Ebola virus. Physical touch of the infected person or their vomitors or urine or something like that. With COVID, once it's respiratory, one person sneezes or cough or something like that, you will have the transmission of the disease. But don't get it wrong. The interventions of dealing with coronavirus and dealing with Ebola, the interventions are the same. Only a few things were added, since in fact is respiratory. The infection management system that we set up in Liberia during the 2014 Ebola outbreak, the pillars and thematic areas of the incident management system, contact tracing, care body management, isolation, giving people PPEs, case management, testing in the lab, intervention that will work. What we added with COVID is the issue of wearing masks because it's respiratory, it's social distancing, we're using quarantine, isolation, and social distancing.
Yes, thank you. Let me hold you there, Mr. Nyeswa. Now, I see Dr. Fallah is trying to make a point. Dr. Fallah, what is trying to raise a point?
Let me make a couple of points. So for the record's sake, Liberia never had a lockdown. Liberia, how we call a partial curfew. Let's get it one clear. We instituted a partial curfew. That is to say, we took this into consideration. People could go in the market and transact, but they will have to go from 3 o'clock. So we never had a lockdown, A. Number two, if you read the first health regulation, to just support what Tolbert said, we made regulation on the number of persons that can attend a funeral and a wedding to not less than 10 persons. We're very cognizant of all of these facts, and so we had to choose between a lockdown completely or a partial curfew, as was done in Guinea and other countries. So we did not have a complete lockdown. What we had was a partial curfew and to restrict counties that had cases. The last point I want to make is that contact tracing for COVID-19 is a bit different because the rule is the number of contacts you generate is large, and the rule of thumb is that in contact tracing for Ebola, we can follow up. But the basic rule of thumb, which no country can afford, was you need institutional follow-up for high-risk contact. High-risk contact need to be isolated and institutionalized. When we used to track people in West Point, we did not have to isolate them, but the rule of thumb is that. So I just want to clarify that we never did a lockdown. We had a partial curfew, and we ensured that we appropriated the rules that said a maximum of 10 persons can go to a funeral. And to produce social distancing, we closed down the nightclub and the churches initially. Just those 2 points.
Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Nyeswa, what, I mean, we saw with predictions on the world stage. People were saying that, for example, there will be dead bodies on the street of Africa. Imagining how we do not have a lot of sophistication in terms of our healthcare delivery system. We're not as sophisticated as those in the West. We saw those people being heavily hit and devastated by COVID-19. And so there were fears and people were concerned that by the time COVID comes on our shores, we will be decimated. What happened that at this point in time, we still are not at the skill, the better skill that was predicted. We are still, at some considerably better level.
Okay, thank you. I was still speaking when Dr. Fallah interjected. But the point is that the strategies and the interventions to deal with coronavirus disease. I was going through what an incident management system is and the pillars of the incident management. Your question is that we do not have vaccine for COVID. We do not have therapeutics for COVID. We had similar situation with Ebola. We did not have vaccine. We did not have therapeutics. We were dealing with the 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak. And this notion that we should wait for vaccine before we do what we're supposed to do for COVID-19, we are getting it wrong. It took us from 2014 when Ebola hit up to 2018 before the world certified a vaccine, almost 4 to 5 years before we got vaccine. They are promising vaccines, but those vaccines might not make it to the market or be certified by the WHO. There are people working on vaccines right now. They are promising some are in phase 1, phase 2, go to 3 stages. But we cannot depend on that. We have to do our contact tracing. We have to do our isolation. We have to do our quarantine. We have to make sure that we track it whatsoever it is. We just developed at John Hopkins University that in New York, the population triple Liberia. The population of the United States is about 320 million people. In Europe, the population there is huge. Contact tracing is working there. We developed a course that trained over 512, almost 500,000 people have taken a contact tracing course that is being cascaded around the world right now that is doing effective contact tracing. And I'm looking at countries like Singapore, China, I'm looking at countries like Hong Kong that did Taiwan, that did effective contact tracing and contained the Ebola outbreak. Africa is not out of the woods yet. There are projections that this disease might end up in Africa as the last area of combating this. What we are blessed with, that we are very happy with the scientific and public health community, is the population of Africa. The population of Africa is younger as compared to if you look at the population pyramids of countries and look at the age range of people who are mostly affected by this disease is in the older population, people above 50, 60 years old. And these countries that have in terms of mortality are those countries with the population aging. The last time I was looking at the Liberian population, between 56 to 60% of the people in Liberia are age 30 when you come to the field. They would be if you look at it from a young population like this, and COVID being a very lazy disease, not like Ebola, you find that people are surviving. There are thousands and thousands of people infected in Liberia as I speak to you today that are either asymptomatic or have survived the disease because there's evidence from WHO that 80% of the people that get the disease, whether or not they sought care or went to hospital, will survive. These are the things that bless the Africa, but it doesn't mean that the disease is not in Africa and affecting people.
Great, great, great. Thank you very much. Harold, I just want you to chime in quickly. From a citizen's perspective, do you think the measures were really working? Do you think they were feasible? Did it really work well? Harold, yeah.
unmute myself. Sorry. Okay, so as I was saying, there's no yes or no response to this, because in the absence of any empirical data, I mean, it will be difficult for me to tell you, yes, the measures have worked, or no, the measures have worked. What is evident is that, yes, indeed, the cases has increased significantly since March, April, up to date. What I know is that, yes, whatever nomenclature we might attempt to call it, be it a lockdown, a partial lockdown, or whatever. But what I know is that these measures largely have not been respected. Now, if you go to our markets, for example, and you see the clustering of the market without any social distancing, without any wearing of masks, you know, these wearing of masks is not enforced at the market centers, where you have thousands of people interacting and engaging through different means. The only places that sometimes the wearing of masks tend to be a little bit enforced when you go to the banks, the supermarkets, but these are places that very few people go to. But the spaces where majority of our population visits, like the Douala market, the Rela market, the Waterside, and these places, our citizens are not adhering to the health measures. And we think that this also largely has contributed to the spike in cases, as we all are talking about. So if you ask me if the measures are working, I think that the evidence speaks for itself as to whether it's working or not. One thing is clear is that we need to be able to do a lot of awareness around behavioral change. And for me, that is where issues of transparency and openness comes in. So when citizens trust their government, the more they tend to trust the information that comes from government. But the more citizens believe that, I mean, maybe government, there is some hidden motive, or government is doing this because the anecdotal evidence that predominantly in the society is that, oh, la money eating again, the men are ready to eat money, right? So we need to dispel this kind of notion, because that is the only way you can get citizens trusting their government the more, and believing in the information coming from the health, the NFIL, the Ministry of Health, and all the other authorities. So we need to actually step up the game in improving the transparency measures, improving information sharing, and getting citizens to trust their government more and more. I believe that that would be the key to addressing and to mitigating many of the distrust, and also helping to reduce the transmission rate as we speak here in Liberia.
Thank you very much, Harold. Now to our last round of questions before we go to our audience. Dr. Fallah, I see your hand is up, but just quickly, I will start with you. Maybe while answering the question, you can make the point you want to make. We see that your public health institute, or the entire COVID response, it's kind of doing well when it comes to information sharing around the outbreak, especially as it regards to the number of cases, active cases, confirmed cases, those who have recovered. We have those regular updates, and I think it's very laudable. I must commend you for that. What we have not seen, and I know you're not the financial person, but I know you are on the incident management system, and it's privy, you are privy to these kinds of information. Dr. Fallah, we have not seen a lot around information as it relates to how much is coming into this response, how much is being spent in fighting COVID-19. We are left in the dark. What is happening? We only get information as to the confirmed cases and what have you, but there's no information. Is it that there are no resource gaps? Because by having this information available to the public, you will actually be sparing efforts for people to come here and help you. And you will also be creating a level playing field and a clean page for citizens to be able to follow their activities. But with us being left in the dark, and you listened to Harold earlier about the issue of citizens' participation, citizens getting access to information is difficult. Why are we being left in the dark? There has to be information out there.
Thank you very much. Maybe just start with the last point. This one I will really defer to the Minister of Health, who is the head of the incident management system, on the issue of sharing on resources. But that's something I take on note, and I will share with the incident management system to find someone a medium to share resources. By the time, and maybe we need to do that more often, because by the time we do that, people will realize that we are operating this response on a very constrained fiscal space for the reason I just mentioned from the beginning. There's little money to go around the world. So very little is coming in, but maybe we'll try to do that. I will raise it with the minister to find a point in time to let people to know. Maybe by the time people get to know how constrained the fiscal space is for this response, maybe many persons will volunteer. And I'm allowed the effort of the private sector. One of the things that we did in the preparedness was to meet the private sector and share with them. They are helping. But I can tell you the response has very constrained financial burden. As you said, in the absence of information, people assume. So we'll take this, elevate this. The second point you raised, when I was running the response on October, the project we had, the hire 5,700 persons, we spent over $5 million for young people to go around. I did not understand the implication why WHO and the UN were giving all money to help people in the field until I got to Boston on the panel, and they said by helping to put money in ordinary people's pocket for a response, it's an indirect way of trying to subdue civil unrest. What you are trying to do in a sense is that you want the economy to go in the local people's hands. So I want people to understand that this happened. In fact, there is an expression called Ebola economy. That is how you get the fund. How does it get to the ordinary people in the response is very critical. The issue of mass, as he said, enforcement and adherence. I have to agree with you that it is a major problem. It is a behavior problem. We are about to publish a paper that will come out very soon. What we try to do in that paper to show that why is it the Liberians have been quick to adapt to hand washing and not shaking hands, right? Since February, they're washing hands and they don't shake hands. But why is it difficult for them to wear masks? What we clearly show in our research we just published in China, because it's a normal behavior in China. Once you have a cough, you wear masks. So it's a behavioral shift, which is difficult. Even in the US, there is a big issue in the US on masks. What we think, like Harold said, is a very serious issue. We need to work on the enforcement piece. That's what we have done at Enfield. The vehicle. The first thing Enfield has done is that all the stores, we have put up a sticker called no mask, no service, no mask, no service. But what we are seeing, people are not following the rules. So once we get a regulation approved, what we'll do is that Enfield intend to set up a multi-agency team consisting of Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Transport, and the police and Enfield. And in the regulation, if we went to a bank and somebody there not wearing masks, we found the institution and we close until you go and make the payment. On the vehicle, if we see a vehicle moving and there's no one, people don't have masks, we impound the vehicle, you pay the fine. Our point is that if we get to this center of gravity through this institution and some punishment, because in terms of knowledge, it has gone up, but there has to be some kind of enforcement. And so we're waiting on the Minister of Health as soon as he can give the approval for this regulation and we can have the approval process. It has to be decision at the individual level, at the institutional level. I agree it's a weakness that we all.
Gerald, can I say something?
Harold, yeah, you have just 1 minute, sir.
Okay, yeah, well, Gerald, I just want to say, I mean, that whole idea of one of the rationale for this whole food distribution is to put, is to sort of reduce tension and, and put money in the hands of Liberians. I think if that assumption was the case, then it didn't go that way. Because even the food that was procured, we did not procure food coming from local producers, right? The rice that were procured from SWAT, and SWAT is a Lebanese business. And I want to find out from the director of Enfield whether he has even seen the rice that they are being distributed, or is being distributed across the Monserrato and some parts. This is substandard rice, a rice that even if he were to buy the rice, if he had an option, he would never choose that rice as a rice to buy and to feed people. So why would we as a nation buy a rice that has that is in terms of the standard and the quality of food is low, and then we'll still buy it and then we'll say we feed our citizens with. Yet the money doesn't go to Liberians, the money goes to foreign nationals and foreign businesses. And why? I mean, it undermines the overall rationale of putting money in the hands of library businesses. So for me, I think it's a flawed assumption, and that assumption has not worked in any way.
Thank you, Harold. Now we'll take the Auditor General. Madam Gaye, you worked around the Ebola funds in terms of audit. First question to you as it relates to the audit of the Ebola funds. The same problems we are raising now, the questions about transparency of information as it relates to response, emergency response. We did not get real-time information during the Ebola outbreak. You had to take your audit to reveal how much came in and what was expended. Is there a problem in terms of accountability, where we have people giving real-time information, or does auditing standards or accounting standards require that you only give report at the end of an activity? Is it possible to have information being released to the public when things are ongoing?
Yes, and we have taken that action, and hopefully we'll start the audit, because we have sent out. We took the initiative from the for our experience with Ebola. So we have asked the Incident Management Center to be prepared that we're coming out to at least audit the first 6 months since it's ongoing. So we hopefully that audit should commence, and we should have the result quickly on that. But no, is that you can do an audit as the problem is going on, like we did with the Ebola fund.
Great. Now, my next question to you, you audited the Ebola funds in 2014. What would you consider as the risks to emergency spending?
That we anticipated that, and we sent a couple of letters to the Incident Management Center and others that in the case of emergency, it's a new disease, as the health experts have mentioned this morning. So people tend to, when emergent, people tend not to take care and keep records and stuff like that. They may not have taken the money, but they don't keep their records. Knowing this, we send those letters ahead and reminded people about the Ebola incident. So they should be mindful in keeping those records, and we will prove that when we go and do our audit. But normally, you can see around the world that people try to take advantage. Even in the civilized societies, or like the more like the U.S., that there's a Congress person right now. They are trying to investigate because he took advantage of it and he made a lot of money. There are times that respiratory equipment was sent for and the company did not send it back. So it's important to be accountable at this time, because people would think that people are so busy that they are trying to prevent this, and so the money get not used for the purpose. So it's common. Even in the side work, we look at that, and several papers have come up. We are a little bit cautious to go right in because of the social distancing rules, and we don't know if we are asymptomatic, and then for the health of the auditors. But no, we will go on and do an audit soon.
Great. Now to Councilor Nyeswa. The report of the Auditor General in 2014 gave out how much came into the country, around $15 million, plus some $342 million Liberian dollars. As part of the findings of the audit report, there were some irregularities amounting to $792,000 United States dollars. When the report came up, members of the incident management team took exceptions to the report. Can you clarify the position at the moment?
Gerald, thank you. Let me give you a background so that our listening audience can get a vivid picture of what transpired during the Ebola crisis. And I hope you will give me a moment, since in fact you raised this issue and the issue of the Ebola audit have been something on the minds of the Liberian people. The $15 million that you mentioned was not the money that, it was not the only money that fought Ebola. That was just a minute, very, very small percentage of what the government of Liberia allocated, and not the millions and millions and billions of dollars that was spent during the Ebola outbreak to bring it under control and save the region. But let me throw light on the $15 million that you mentioned. When the Auditor General issued a report, the inconclusive report, the reason I say inconclusive, the Auditor General's report, at the end of the report, the Auditor General was very, very clear and said, and I can read that part, based on the audit work performed, we have not been able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to provide a basis for a conclusion. Accordingly, we do not express a conclusion on the available records of the National Ebola Trust Fund for the period August 1 to October. So there was not an opinion on that report when the Auditor General issued it on April 25th. Now, let me provide this background. I've said it before to the National Legislature when I was appointed as Deputy Minister when I went for my confirmation hearing. And I will say it again in this public manner on your topic. There was, in July, Ebola started in March of 2014. The government of Liberia set up a task force then, headed by President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, co-chaired by the Speaker then, Ellis Tyler, and appointed Mr. Tolbert to manage the National Ebola Trust Fund. It was in June, July. I was appointed as incident manager on August 11, 2014. There is a complete distinction between the National Ebola Trust Fund and the incident management system. The incident manager reported to the President of Liberia, as well as the national coordinator of the National Ebola Trust Fund reported to the President of the Republic of Liberia. When the incident management was appointed, the entire team conglomerated and came together as one team to fight the virus. But the National Ebola Trust Fund was already spent and managed by the team set up by the President and Mr. Tolbert. Mr. Tolbert took direct instruction from the President of the Republic of Liberia and the Minister of Finance, Mr. Amara Kone, on how to execute the $2 million that were audited by the General Auditing Commission. I said it when I went for confirmation under oath. I was never audited. I was not part of the National Trust Fund group that spent the $15 million. How my name got in the audit report, the Auditor General and myself never met one day. I was never issued an engagement letter. I was never interviewed for that audit. So I have absolutely no clue as to how the $15 million was spent and why my name was in the audit report. Now, the United Nations set up a United Nations annual fund, the multi-party trust fund, that was spent by all the United Nations agencies. And they came up with their own audit report. They spoke with me, since in fact, I was the head of the Liberia Ebola management team. The USAID, and if you go to, you can get it, you can jot it down and get it, 2016 annual report. I have a copy here before me. I also have a copy of the GSC report because I knew the Auditor General was coming on this show and it was Ebola and transparency that this was going to come up. I have it before me here. I also have the USAID, the money that the US government spent and how they accounted for their resources. So my role, my job as the incident manager at the time, was to stop Ebola, get to zero, a resilient zero, use international resources. How Liberia's $15 million was spent. The best person to provide information is Mr. Dobojala and his team. And I was happy to issue, together with Mr. Dobojala, a 32-page response report. Thank you.
If you could.
Thank you very much. Just a follow-up. You said you didn't know how your name surfaced in the report. You also said that you did not directly participate in the management of these funds. Now, you make reference now to other reports, which are not part of the $15 million that was spent by the Liberian government, but rather by donor agencies. How then are you seeing yourself in the report? Do you view that by these agencies getting in touch with you to respond during their audit, does that imply that you were involved with the management of Ebola funds?
No, I did not say that. What I just said is that every agency had their resources that they expended and how they accounted for them. So I was example to the multi-party trust fund that was set up by the United Nations. When they came for their audit, what they did was the UN agency said they deliver X, Y, and Z. Did you see those kind of stuff? They didn't even put their name didn't put my name in their report. The US government did their audit with the US institution that had their resources. And when they came on the ground, they asked whether the US Department of Defense built Ebola treatment units. And I said, yes. Whether USAID supported agencies. Dr. Fallah alluded to the $5 million that UNDP spent to support his job that he was doing, because I put him in charge of the community engagement, community initiative that he was doing to do contact tracing and active case filing, and UNDP supported his program that direct resources did not come to me. So what I'm saying is that some of the organizations spend their own money, and when they were doing their independent audits, they got in touch with me and said, look, how was this done? Did the organization do this? And those I have information about, I was able to provide that information. In the case of the GSC report, the man who was the incident management chair, whose name was flagged in that report, Tolbert Nyeswa, incident management chair, there was no engagement letter sent to me. I was not audited. I have no response in our audit report, and the Auditor General is on this talk. Nobody contacted me. The first time I saw that report when it was already published and in the press.
Thank you very much.
Under oath at the national legislature, and I maintain it talk to today until somebody proved me wrong, that there was an engagement letter, that Tolbert Nyeswa was informed that there was an audit, that he participated in the audit, while he was questioned in the audit, and he provided any response to the audit. I did not see the report of that. And it was fair to have not talked to me. It was very fair, Garrett, to have not talked to me. The reason it was fair is that the man who they should have talked to was Mr. Dobojala, directly because he was the man appointed by President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf to manage the $15 million as the Ebola Trust Fund. And bank accounts were open for that trust fund. Tolbert Nyeswa was never to any signatory of a bank account. I did not issue one.
So let me hold you there. Let me hold you there. Now to the Auditor General. Madam Gaye, what is the standard practice during audits? Do you write engagement letters to everyone concerned with a transaction? How do you get to flag people in the audit report? Here, Mr. Nyeswa claimed that he was never invited for any audit hearing, he was never engaged. How come did he appear in the report?
The section, before the Auditor General comes, section 5.6 of the GSC GSC law, of the GSC law, talks about engagement letter. Prior to the commencement of an audit, the Auditor General or his delegated representative shall inform the officials of the auditor entity through an engagement letter about the type of the audit to be undertaken, audit objective, staff involved, timing and expected duration of the audit, and any other pertinent information. And there are regulations that are supposed to be followed.
Thank you. Now, Madam Auditor General, how do you respond to my earlier question? You hear Mr. Nyeswa give some legal reference as to how you proceed with audits.
Thank you, Gerald. The first thing is we should look at the report, and we look at the GSC law. The law that Mr. Nyeswa is reading does not affect the Ebola Trust Fund. That was a new act that had not been sent into handbill. So we're working on it, and it mixed it up. So that's why his 32-page letter, I won't sit to answer it. The thing is that you do not send each individual a letter saying, I'm coming to audit. We don't audit individuals. We audit organization entities or that organization. So that audit letter was sent. And then when you send out the report, is the person in charge of the fund, it's their duty to contact that. I'm sure that Tolbert Nyeswa will be contacted, but I will not go into that because we just want to clear. But clear the, make it clear, because I, the Auditor General, don't go out and do audit. I have the staff that go out to do audit, and I supervise those staff. The same way how he had staff that he sent out, they brought him reports and he read them. Okay, so that's the same process. We do not audit individuals, we audit organizations. So, okay, so I have here a letter that was sent to the engagement, I have an engagement letter that was sent to the incident management, because even all that came about through my suggestion. If you look in that report, it was before the incident management was set up, it was, you had individuals that it was even ministries that was sending monies to, and we advised that in the time of a pandemic, or epidemic or emergency, it is good to have a group of people that you can hold accountable. And when you talk about names in the audit report, that order was done under the executive order of 1972, and our law, our own law, said you name people. After we came in and put in that the GSC law of 2014, you look at our reports going, oh, we don't put people's name, we say management, because we corrected that. So it's, as he was talking about country context, you have standards, and then you have you have to follow your country context. And in my mind, as someone that had been in auditing for a long time, we do not call in individual name, but that was a practice in Liberia before we corrected it by the GSC Act of 2014. And it was passed in December 2014 and was put into law in 2015.
Just to understand the new law, Madam Auditor General, what does the new law mean? If you cannot name people in the audit report now, and you just say management, what does it mean for accountability? How do you hold people accountable when you just say management? Management is
because you know our financial practice, right? I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Can you hear me? You know, yes, because in our financial laws in Liberia, the PFN Act says that no matter whether I do the job, they are giving me here the responsibility to run GSC, and they're providing me these other help. But it's my responsibility to oversee GSC. So if anything goes wrong, I take the liability to be, and I should be held accountable. That's what the law says. So for you to name somebody, but when you go down, that minister can hold individual accountable. And you will see in the GSC reports, we have those who are in the responsibility sector, and you will know who that affect. So that's why, and it's just an ancient law that because we're doing these things on a test basis, you have to be, and you have to be careful how you hold people accountable. So this is why when we see that, and somebody is going wrong, we send the LSCC in to do a deed, and we can even call the police to hold those people accountable.
Yeah, so Madam Auditor General, so are you saying if we were to reverse time to 2014, the audit report would not be naming Tolbert Nyeswa?
What?
Are you saying if we were to reverse the time to 2014, and this law was in effect at the time of 2014, are you saying that the report would not have named the Nyeswa and others?
It would say the Incident Management Center, and those that are who are managing them will be culpable. And when Mr. Nyeswa said that was not conclusive, there are 4 opinions in an audit report. You either certify that everything is okay, you see that which is and when you do that last conclusion, that means you did not get a lot of information to make that decision. And all the international report that he's talking about, all of them came to that same conclusion where Liberia was concerned. You see, because as I said before, we have, when we're spending money, we don't keep the documentation. And for you to make an informed decision, there must be documentation. So that's one of the 4 the opinions that we render in an audit report, and you don't want to get that. You want to get an uncertified report.
Great. Now, just before I leave you to go to our audience, Mr. Nyeswa, this is my final question to you. I read a piece from you in the Front Page Africa newspaper, in which you basically were rejoining to a claim made in the Daily Observer newspaper, a claim that says, well, how do we succeed against COVID when monies that were allocated for NFIL were siphoned by Mr. Tolbert Nyeswa, and he escaped to the United States? How do we succeed against COVID? You wrote a rejoinder to that piece. Why were you arguing, basically?
Okay, look, those are part of the noise. Those are part of the noise and distraction in the market. I wrote the rejoinder, and I think you read it. It was very explicit about money, about NFIL. I left NFIL with a very clean record. I mobilized a lot of resources before I even went to NFIL as the Director General. Look, people should follow people's track record. If you follow people's track record, accountability, transparency during, before, during, after an emergency is a sine qua non to everything that I do in my life. I started my public career with a lot of very good money that I play with and supervised from the international world. I ran a successful malaria program when people didn't even know the name Tolbert Nyeswa between 2004 to 2011. I brought in the first $12 million United States dollars that changed the drug policy of Liberia and managed malaria in Liberia when our money was managed by UNDP, and PricewaterhouseCoopers was the funding agency for those resources. Then I became the Assistant Minister of Health. We raised money through the pool, health sector pool fund under the leadership of Dr. Walter Gweningali. Donors trusted us because we were transparent. When I went to the National Public Health Institute, Dr. Fallah is on the call, we raised money. The $15 million US that he talked about, loan from the World Bank, it was through my effort to bring that money. The US agency, CDC, brought in $1.5 million a year and dropped it down to $500,000 a year, $1 million before I left Liberia because of the credibility that we have running that institution.
So you did not escort with public money?
It has never been my culture. I have never been involved in that. I gave you my review of the GAC's audit report, and I challenged the Auditor General again. She's on this call, and we had a conversation before in very, very high place. She knows very well what I'm talking about. when the audit report was issued, we had a very good conversation. My repetition was just hard for nothing. Thing in the air for nothing. I had nothing to do with Ebola resources. A team was appointed to manage it. I was never on the management team. I was never signatory to its bank accounts. I did not execute any order. I didn't delegate responsibility, in fact. If you had an institution, for example, I ran Enfield from 2017 to 2019 before I resigned. Any audit within that time that want to come up, if you hold me responsible, I will take responsibility for such an error. The reason is I was the head of that institution. Whether or not I executed a paper or wrote a check, but I had a responsibility in overseeing Enfield from 2017 to 2019. So any audit report within that time, I would take responsibility. It was over and under my supervision. The Ebola Trust Fund will never under my supervision. The Auditor General even knew more than me, more than I knew. The reason she knew is she was attending some of the meetings with the president and Mr. Dobajala when they were executing how to spend the money. I saw letters to that effect. Tolbert Nyeswa was not in the picture. So it was a mistake, it was an error, but it is breached under the water right now. The Auditor General issued a report, my name is in the report, and I'm also excited that it went to the court and the court threw it out of the window that this man had nothing to do with funds. So I'm a very transparent, clean, with integrity young man, and this is why the US government funded very well and hired me to work for them. And before you work in the system I'm working in right now, they do 100% background check on your integrity, where you have worked, what you have done, and they give you security clearance to work. I have a security clearance to work for the US government. That means I'm a clean guy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nyeswa, for the clarity. Now we just have a few minutes left, so we will go to our participants on Zoom. So if you have any comments you want to make, I see we have some comments in the question and answer section. Also, if you want to speak, we can give you the opportunity. You just raise your hand and we'll be able to do that. I see a question by Madam Jeanette Mohammed, and I see that our panelist, Howard, has already attempted to answer that, and that was around the World Food Program. So thank you very much, Howard. You also responded to Mr. Shine Williams' comment also. And there's a comment here from Mr. Matthew Carley. Matthew is asking the Auditor General that I read a comment verbatim. So Matthew, my name, Madam Auditor General, on the record, did you send Mr. Nyeswa an engagement letter? And to Dr. Fallah, how is Enfield managing the crisis communication mechanism because information coming to the public is inaccurate and to some extent too many people are speaking? So maybe we'll start with Auditor General now. And I think you made a point that you served it on the engagement letter on the head of the team, but maybe just want to clarify for the sake of the attendee.
Mr. Cully, you do not give engagement letter to individuals. You give it to the entity or the group that is, or the organization that is managing. So we did not serve Mr. Nyeswa an engagement letter, and we will not do that. Thank you.
Great. Now, Dr. Fallah, the comment here is how are you managing the response, especially in terms of communication mechanism? There are too many people speaking and confusing the public.
So the response is managed by an incident management system. The head of the incident management system, the chair, is the Minister of Health. But we have a mandate as a National Public Health Institute. Again, when we get involved in this kind of panel, our goal is to learn some key lessons. We'll listen. At least one thing we recommend to the incident management system brought by Hara is how we can tell the public more about the finances. And I can tell them for sure that the more the public get to know, the more they will understand that we're working on a constrained financial situation. That money is not coming like before. That's one. Number two, people spoke on the issue of trying to do huge level of enforcement when it comes to masks, like Hara Order said. That is an issue, like I said, we are going to work on that very quickly. Once we get the approval for the regulation, the regulation that we're trying to sign by the Justice Minister, the Minister of Health, and the President, will now MPhil will put together a multi-agency task force to ensure that we get through institutions and vehicles to correct that. The third piece, what we have decided to do is that we have decided, we have discussed yesterday, that every week, it can be 2 times a week, MPhil as a scientific body will collate all the information and let the public to know. We're going to do that officially. Beginning next week, we'll have two days a week. We'll come with all the scientific evidences that we've put together for that week. And so the public will have systematic scientific knowledge. I'd like to see what Tony Fauci is doing in the US. Tony Fauci comes and gives clarity. That's what we're going to do. Beginning the coming week, as our new strategy, ask MPhil, the Public Health Institute, that has been mandated to protect the public. Every week we'll come up with scientific evidences to support. And starting today, using this audience, the first and most important scientific evidence is that in the absence of a vaccine, our best bet to live a normal life is the use of masks. And we have to do as individuals, as communities. And so that's how we're going to do to manage the misinformation. We are going to have 2 major programs every week to educate the public on the scientific evidences. That's one. We're going to work on the enforcement of masks. Once we get the approval, and we're going to put this team together to begin to work. We are trying to even work with the motorbike union. So you're going to see some activities coming on. That one area MPhil is going to emphasize its efforts to have the use of the mask going on as the best way to help the country. So thank you very much. We have listened and we have learned, and we're going to adapt appropriately.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'll wrap up. So, I mean, it's been a very long 2 hours, and we really commend our panelists for the patience and time. So we now take Harold. Harold, what will be your closing remarks?
Well, let me say thank you. I mean, my closing remark, I think it's important that we all are beginning to identify areas that we can improve to ensure that on the overall, we contribute to reducing the transmission, and we get our citizens to trust the information coming from us. I think largely we can say, yeah, there's been considerable amount of effort being put in by MPhil and other, the Ministry of Health and so forth. But the issue is the lack of trust. You know, lack of trust creates a condition for people to, even if the information is factual, people don't tend to believe it. So what we're saying is that, look, we need to improve the information. We need to get our citizens to trust it. And that goes even beyond COVID. When citizens don't trust their government, anything that comes from them, you know, for them, they don't take it seriously. So let's improve the information, the regularity of the information, the systematization of the information, and to make sure that ultimately we can all contribute to reducing the fight against COVID. And thank you, Gerald, for having me and for being part of this panel.
Honorable Nyeswa, thank you very much, Harold. And Nyeswa, what would be your parting comments?
I think this was a very useful interaction about the COVID and transparency. And as I said again, being accountable and transparent, not only during an emergency, but before, during, and after an emergency have always been a sine qua non of what I have done in my 20 years of public career in Liberia, and the record can show for itself for institutions that I've worked for, and the efforts that we've made to build. We built institutions from scratch and get them up running. I'm excited that some of the work that we've done in Liberia is being used right now to fight the COVID-19 epidemic, and people that have worked with institutions that we set up in the National Public Health Institute is being used, the laboratory system, the contact trace, or the epidemiologists that we train, very smart people that are working in MPhil. They should be used to help Liberia. That's the reason when we got rid of the Ebola outbreak, the goal was to build a resilient healthcare system. And so we are just a true story away. We can always be a part of that. And also the GAC is an institution that was created to prevent waste, to check people for corruption, and for people to be accountable. It's a very, very great institution. Audit is superb. I have done there with auditors, so many auditors, international, local auditors in my public life with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, and supreme audit organizations that you can think about, like the GAC. I've audited us several times in other areas. So accountability is very, very key. If you are accountable, you are transparent, donor can trust you to give you their resources. This is what part of my strength, of which I was able to raise millions and millions of dollars for Liberia. When I left Liberia, I left millions of dollars in infill, not in the personal bank accounts, but partners' money that they brought. Always government does not have the resources. So you use the internet, you leverage the international goodwill, but they don't just waste money, Garrett. Trust me, they don't just waste money on you when you're not transparent. You got to be transparent. You got to be accountable. And that's one of our strengths. One thing I also did when I took over as the Director General of Enfield, I wrote 3 letters. 3 letters. The first letter went to IAA. I called the internal audit agency to send me internal auditors. I left them there before I came to the United States. The second letter I signed was to the PricewaterhouseCoopers, because the U.S. Center for Disease Control was bringing in their millions of dollars to support Liberia through the Ministry of Health, and they wanted a co-signatory to that. So we went through a procurement process and brought PwC to sit with me in my office, and were co-signing check with my deputy, with the Ministry of Health controllers and other people that were managing the COA. The third letter that I signed was to target an organization for HR management. They call them Target. We procured them, they came up, set up our entire HR system, and recruited an HR manager today that is at the end. So those are steps that you take. You take regulatory steps before even the auditors can come and audit you. And so in life is not a straight line. Sometimes you get a bumpy road. And the GAC audit report, the 15 million, were part of the bumpy road. And we got over that now. It's bridge under the water. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Nyeswa. Dr. Fallah, what will be your parting comments?
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir, you're live. Yes, no, I was asking, what will be your parting comments?
I missed a point. Can you repeat? Again, my parting comment, Bill Gates said, life will never be normal until we have the vaccine. Tony Fauci said, in the absence of vaccine, we have to wear masks. Whenever you sit with a group, you have to wear masks. This is a decision we have to make at the community level, at the individual level, in the families, in the businesses, like the bank. Is the most responsible thing to do for yourself and for your family. You may be healthy, but the person you infect could die. Let us wear our mask, and if possible, let's avoid public gathering, nightclubs, beaches. Let's put a stop to that now until we can find a vaccine. Most importantly, when you're going to be with a group, wear a mask. Wear your mask. I can't overemphasize it. Mask wearing has been shown that in the absence of a vaccine, we all need to take this as a group and as a nation to adopt the issue of mask wearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Auditor General. What will be your own parting comments?
My comment is transparency and accountability is the bedrock of democracy, in a democratic governance. Transparency and accountability is the bedrock in a democratic government, and the lack of it has the propensity of breaking public distrust in the fight and elimination of a virus. Accountability does not mean that you officials are responsible, but we as individuals should be accountable to ourselves. Therefore, in the fight against the virus, we as Liberians have to be accountable to ourselves, because by wearing your mask and your practicing social distancing will help alleviate this virus or control it, and you will have also taken part in this process and make Liberia a better place. So again, I thank those for listening, and I hope we had more interaction on accountability and trust, but this is a health issue. People are more concerned with the virus itself, which is the right thing to do at this time. But we will do the best we can to make sure that we do our part in the accountability and transparency of public resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Auditor General. We don't take our own Executive Director, Mr. Miamin. You have followed the discussion, sir. What would you say to our panelists and our listening audience? Mr. Miamin, you are muted.
Am I okay?
Yes,
Yeah, am I okay? Yeah, let me say thank you to our panelists for the very insightful conversation. We appreciate them so lot for everything they've said and done today. We hope that as we have indicated, we will move forward with this conversation, that we have several of them in the coming weeks and months, so that citizens access to information, especially so pieces of information that help them to make informed decisions are timely available. I also like to say thank you to members of the public, those in the diaspora and here in Liberia that followed the conversation through the different platforms available. We want to say thank you for all of your contributions, the inputs, the questions asked. Even those who were not able to ask questions, we still thank you for staying on to listen and get information that you can use to make informed decisions as we engage with the fight against COVID-19 and other events and processes in the country. I also like to say thank you to you and the team for the remarkable efforts put into ensuring that the maiden edition of this conversation becomes a success. And like I said, let's hope that we do more to sustain these kinds of conversations so that people have information about what is happening. My last point would be the point made by Gerald, which Dr. Fallah has accepted about availability of information to the public, not just on the number of cases or the medical data or information available on recovery, the cases, and some of the other things, but information on the resources that are coming in. People speculate if they do not have information, and usually that speculation is not in favor of the service provider or the entity that is supposed to provide certain services. So in this case, the government has to do more. I like the fact that he has accepted to engage with his colleagues so that just as they provide information to the public about the number of cases and some of the things they're doing from a health standpoint to deal with the situation, we can also have timely information on how much has come in and what the government has been able to use so far on the fight against COVID-19. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. We hope to see you another time as we continue with the conversation.
Thank you, Anderson. And comments just coming in from Facebook. Kemoka, he says, WFP is putting our integrity on the line. And we have Amona Mweda Martin just asking the Auditor General in reference to some comments he made. Civilized societies, ladies and gentlemen, all good things must come to an end. On this note, we want to say a very big thank you to all of you following this program, Integrity Television. We hope this has been meaningful to you. Don't let it show to like and share our Facebook page, Integrity TV on YouTube and on Facebook. Until we meet again, remember to live with integrity, even when no one is watching. Thank you very much.
When no one is watching.
Thank you.